Reviewing the fundamentals of academic writing is an essential part of beginning any new university-level writing course. To bring your writing to the next level, it's essential that we revisit the foundational components that were introduced to you in your previous English writing classes. In this three-part lecture, we will revisit the steps and techniques necessary to move from idea generation to the final polished draft. In part one, we're going to cover the basics of academic writing and discuss the first steps in the writing process. At the end of each part, you'll complete a short quiz before moving on to the next lecture. Academic writers draw on the curiosity that drives everyone to wonder about the world. We want to know why people act a certain way, believe in a certain idea, why the world is the way it is. It's curious to consider why some people have an aversion to chocolate or a fear of flying, why singing can mask one's accent, or why more of us prefer French fries over raw oysters. Topics are everywhere, as long as we're willing to think critically about the world. And that means asking questions. That means wondering things like, why, how, or what if? There are so many great questions worth asking. Exploring those ideas in writing, inventing the deeper, more complex thoughts are what lead us as academic writers to get closer and closer to an answer, or as we like to call it in writing, a thesis. So let's start off by looking more closely at the connection between curiosity and the topics writers choose to explore. It's important as an academic writer to sow the seeds of curiosity for our own sake and for the sake of our readers. The more time we spend observing, the more time we roam and wonder, the more we question everything, the stranger and more wonderful our world becomes. As a writer, it's essential that one become excited about a potential topic, to pull it close to you and uncover the pieces of it that matter and are worth exploring. Granted, not every topic is exciting, nor are they meant to be. But it isn't necessarily the topic itself where awe and wonder lies. It's in what you do with that topic, what you say about it, the perspective you take on it, what you might ask about it. That will make it exciting, insightful, and new. So treat a topic like a piece of origami paper. Find a dozen different ways to fold it and discover what shape it makes. One or more of those shapes could change your perspective of the world and affect you and your readers in ways you may not have realized. The most important quality shared by all writers is the ability to think critically. It's understandable that that's a loaded term, critical thinking, because it's so often tossed around in a classroom like an overinflated beach ball, and everyone is expected to keep it afloat. But what does it really mean? Critical thinkers are those with the mind to see what others don't, either what others can't see, or simply what others are too afraid to see. The world is meant to challenge us. Unlike our cars, it is not designed for cruise control or autopilot. We as academic writers are in the driver's seat, and thinking critically means we can go wherever we want, as long as we ask the right questions. If we accept that the world just is the way it is, then we will never ask the questions that are essential to discover anything new. We will never know more than we already know. We will never see more than what's on the placid, flat surface of the obvious. It's our responsibility to make ripples in the calm water. Important, insightful questions are what bring us answers that uncover complexity below the surface. It allows us to develop arguments about ourselves and the world that will challenge both us as writers and our audience alike. So let's take a look at some examples of how one can move beyond the shallow and obvious ideas about the world. And we'll begin to uncover the complexity that is essential to academic writing. The first example poses a simple statement, one that we know to be true from countless examples over the millennia of recorded history. Racism is bad. Very true, but what knowledge have we gained by making this statement? What challenge exists in this phrase to want to know more? Now take a moment to read the statement made that exemplifies critical thinking. Here is a thoughtful, insightful, specific idea that is challenging and complex. The same applies to example number 2, global warming. Where the writer lacks critical thinking, we are left to wonder about nothing. This simple statement presents nothing more than disagreement at the heart of the argument. The more complex idea on the right is worth exploring much more deeply. Topics don't write themselves, nor can any writer, even those with years or even decades of experience and practice, expect to know everything there is to know about a complex idea without first exploring it with invention writing. The process of invention writing goes by many names, and different teachers will have different methods and advice on the best ways to generate your ideas. Mine is just one of many. But what I feel is the most important piece of advice is don't underestimate the power of paper. It's no doubt that we live in a digital age, but there is something more intimate, more subtle, and in the end more thoughtful about putting pen to paper and letting your hand create and explore the ideas in words on the page. The fast pace that technology thrives upon and demands of us can often leave behind the thoughtfulness and the reflection that handwriting allows. So rely on a notebook for your free writing exercises, the brainstorming lists, the mapping of ideas that will help you to explore the complex thoughts and qualities of every topic you're writing about. The more time you take to invent ideas, the less of a struggle the first draft will be to write. So much relies on what you can discover and uncover during the invention writing process, so don't sell short its value as a part of your writing process. With all your initial thoughts, discoveries, and research on paper, sifting through it all to figure out what you really want to say about a topic can be very overwhelming. Writers often begin to wonder and worry, how am I ever going to turn all of this into a 3 or a 5 or a 10-page paper? Regardless of length or genre or topic, all papers have one thing in common, a thesis statement. But not all thesis statements are alike. A rhetorical analysis thesis is different from a personal narrative thesis, which is different from a biology lab report thesis. Regardless of the type of essay you're writing, regardless of the topic, a thesis statement must always meet certain criteria. A thesis statement is just that, a statement. While a writer will often ask a question to start, it is the answer to that question that becomes the thesis. And that thesis must be opinion or argument-based rather than a statement of fact. In the end, a thesis demands that it be proved in some way, through experiment, observation, storytelling, or analysis. Statements of fact are just that, a fact. The next criteria is where the writer's critical thinking skills come into play. A thesis needs to have an element of risk, insight, and originality to it. The obvious ideas about the world aren't worth writing about or reading about. Lastly, a thesis must focus on the central topic of the essay. This may seem obvious, but the thesis is the first guidepost any reader looks for. It's the writer's job to start the reader out right from the beginning with clarity and focus. So let's look again at some examples and consider the criteria for strong thesis statements. The issue with the first statement on the left is that it isn't a statement at all. It's a question. A good one, yes, but it lacks the opinion or argument necessary to carry the essay. A question like this could start a writer out in exploring complexity and encouraging critical thinking. What a detailed and thoughtful session of invention writing may produce is a strong thesis like the one on the right. This statement meets all the criteria for a powerful and insightful thesis. This thesis has the power to hook a reader and carry an essay from introduction to conclusion. The same can be said for example number 2. The thesis on the left is a statement. It's not a question. That's good. But it's simple. It's obvious. It's underdeveloped. There's no complexity. Nothing insightful. This is a clear example of the so what thesis. A reader will likely stop to say, I already knew that. What more is there to learn? But on the right is a thesis with specifics. This one is full of the power and thoughtfulness that will capture the reader's attention. and promise an essay that will satisfy the reader's curiosity and desire to know more. Starting the writing process and maintaining focus and discipline long before a writer sees that first draft on paper can be very difficult. Once the gate opens, so many young writers want to take off in a sprint to the finish line with assignment sheet in hand, hoping that they can finish as quickly as possible. But good writing takes time. Be patient. Remain focused on the task at hand. The first rule of good writing is to trust in the process. Writers who begin to worry about step 4 will make completing the first 3 steps very painful, sometimes even impossible. That is the very definition of writer's block. So avoid it by taking one step at a time. Use the discovery process to your advantage. Ideas become clear through invention writing. Discover that complexity. Develop that thesis worth exploring. Your essay and your reader will thank you for it. Thank you for joining me in this first of 3 lectures. Next up is part 2 of our review, which will cover coherence, organization, and style. But before you can move on, be sure to complete the part 1 quiz.